Hey guys, welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. So we are going to get incredibly cold tonight, 19 degrees for us, which is pretty cold. I feel like the coldest temperature that I've seen here in the upstate of South Carolina since we've been here is about 11 degrees. So we have a little bit of prep that we have to do in the garden, but I thought that I would give you a little bit of a garden tour really quick just to show you what things have been surviving down to 26 degrees. That's kind of where we've been sitting at night. And so I wanted to show you what you can grow down to that basically without any cover. I've just recently covered some of my carrots and things like that, but those have been out in the elements. So let's get started and I will show you guys what's doing great and what has died and what needs to be protected tonight for those lower temperatures. This bed just basically volunteered with a bunch of dill, which just means that it came up on its own. I must have had a dill plant here over the summer season and it went to seed and just kind of dispersed some of the seed. So these guys just came up, and until yesterday, these guys were standing upright and they were really pretty, but you can see 26 degrees kind of did these in. We have been sitting a little bit higher at night, but I think last night was probably the coolest that we've gotten. So these guys, if I do want to keep them, I probably need to put a frost cover over these. I'm not sure that I will. So here's a bed of lettuce that I planted probably in September. And we have been pulling from this bed. In fact, this is probably the second or third time that this lettuce has come back. It was doing really good up until about a week ago when we started to get into the temperatures below 30 degrees. But you can see now that 26, 27, 28 degrees is really damaging it. I probably need to pull this bed, but if you're gonna grow lettuce throughout the winter season or try to grow it into the colder months, a great way to go is gonna be your leaf lettuce. They tend to be much more tolerant of the freezes and the frosts. You can even put a frost fabric over this to extend its life just a little bit. And if you really want to keep growing through those freezes, you can do some movable container gardening. I use green stalks and we just roll those into the garage at night when it gets too cold and put them out in the sun during the day. The lettuce this time of year is never bitter. It is very sweet and it just has a great flavor. So this is really an optimal time, as well as early spring is a great time to grow lettuce. Sometimes in the really hot months, my lettuce tends to get pretty bitter. So fall, winter, and early spring are going to be your best seasons to get the best tasting lettuce. Moving on to this next bed, these are just perennials. These are globe artichokes. And because we had stayed so warm for so long, we were a good 5 weeks after our normal first frost date before we started to get really cold and get some consistent frosts. These guys came back up, but inevitably they will die back and they will start sprouting again in the springtime. I won't be able to get anything from these guys during the winter because in order to produce, they need to kind of send up a center stalk with that artichoke on it, and it won't do that until next season. So these guys are just going to die, so no reason to give these any cover. Here I have just a curly bit of Escarole or endive. It is doing very well for being out without any cover. I can definitely pull from this. There is a little bit of damage here and there, but I'm gonna see what I can do with this after tonight. After we reach down into those 19-degree temperatures and into the teens, we're gonna see how this does without any cover. This is a really good cold hardy crop. We like to take this and put this into soups and stews. You could even use it in place of lettuce on a sandwich and probably not notice too much of a difference. I would not use this as your main base in a salad. It would just be too bitter for that. But you can do a lot of stuff with Escarole or endive. In this bed, I have some radishes, and these are far beyond harvesting. I've left them in the ground far too long, and they're just gonna be really woody. They'll probably be split at this point. So I'm gonna leave these in. They did start to flower. I am not sure if I would get any viable seeds from these, but I'm gonna leave them in because maybe in the spring I might get an early harvest to save some seeds from off of these guys. I also have some kale. This will take a little bit of a beating. You can see it looks a little wilty. It looks, you know, a little bit damaged, but I really don't see any burn on the leaves or anything like that. And in fact, I do have some of this up in my green stalks, and I have noticed that they're pretty wilty up there too, but still totally edible, good for a salad, good for a soup or stew or anything like that. And then of course I have some leeks in here. These guys don't need any cover. They will go through the winter, and in early spring we will have a good harvest of leeks. So you don't really need to worry about the leeks or the kale. If you're getting down lower than the high teens, you may want to give this some cover if this was the only bit of kale that you had. But because I have some in my green stocks, I'm not going to worry too much about this. And I have some much more mature plants over in the in-ground garden that will take a freeze and frost much, much better than the younger plants will. So if you've ever wondered if cilantro is something that you can grow in the colder months, you definitely can. This did well up until about last week, down into the upper 30s and high 20s, but last night, like I said, I think we were down to 27. So a little bit of frost fabric on this and I could have saved it. There are still some viable leaves down here. I am sure that this will be gone tonight once we get down into the teens, and you can see that this plant has taken quite a bit of a hit. It would probably come back if we weren't going to stay consistently cold at night, but this is probably the end of the cilantro's life. And this is honestly when I like to grow cilantro, because in the summer it bolts so quickly. You can get a good harvest off of this into the fall and into the winter time, and just dehydrate it and, you know, get that up in your cupboard so that you have a good supply of this. Because springtime, I mean, unless you're harvesting it right away and succession sowing, and sometimes even with the succession sowing, it's so hot that that seed won't germinate. So this is a great time of year to grow this, especially if you're giving it some cover. I have about 3 plants of parsley here. This is a giant flat leaf parsley. This is going to do just fine. I have seen parsley completely freeze through, be completely solid as ice, and come back just fine. In fact, I'm going to leave these in here. I'm not going to give them any cover, and they're going to be just fine through the winter for me, and in spring they will be beautiful as well. They'll probably end up flowering sometime next year. I believe that parsley is a biennial, which means that it doesn't flower the first year, but it does that second year. So I'm going to leave these in here. I have been pulling from this and dehydrating some of these, and of course we like to use these in fresh salads this time of year, as well as on top of our soups as a garnish, in meatballs for that fresh parsley flavor, on spaghetti, lots of things. You can even do a pesto out of parsley. So a lot of things that you can do with this, but at least get some dehydrated this time of year so that you can have it up on your shelf. One of my main crops through the fall and winter garden are carrots. Carrots grown in the winter time are so incredibly sweet. In the summer, I kind of say that they're spicy. They just have a bit of a distinct spicy flavor to them. But in the winter time, they are very sweet. That cold temperature just makes them really sweet, and they're really great to eat. So these are not 100% mature yet. I'll pull one. I've gotten a few that are a little bit bigger than this, but these are not 100% mature, so they do need a little bit more time. You can see that they've been laid over because they have been exposed to everything. I just ended up covering these yesterday. I have 3 beds of carrots, and so yeah, so just I wanted to give them a little bit more time to mature and a little bit more coverage. Now, if these were completely mature, I would not cover them at all because they would just be fine in the ground, and I would just come down and harvest them whenever I needed them. But because I want them to grow just a bit more, I wanted to keep the temperature in here a little bit warmer. And to finish off, here's the in-ground garden. I have a row of broccoli here. This is pretty much gone. This was all mature, and I took most of this. I left a few to go to seed because I noticed that the bees and the insects were still kind of active, so I just sort of left those there. They may give me some seed that I can save from. This row here that's covered, I'm going to show you guys some footage. I just covered this right before I shot this video. But this was a group of cabbages that I had planted a bit later. And so this needs some more time to mature. I had some early golden acres in there, which is a 60-day variety, a nice little compact 3-pound head. I also have some curly leafed Savoy cabbage. It's like a purple Savoy cabbage. Those are really frost and freeze hardy, but because we're getting down to the teens, I did want to give this just a little bit of coverage. They need a little bit more time. And then I do have some more cabbages up in the front of the garden here. Most of those were storage cabbages, and they were ready to come out of the ground. So we went through and harvested those. You can see that they actually have a good amount of damage on them. Not necessarily the heads themselves. If the heads do have any damage, I can just peel back that layer. of leaf, that cabbage leaf, and underneath the cabbage will be completely intact. But you can see that the outer leaves look a little wilty. They just look a little bit sad, and I did not want to take the chance that these guys were not going to make it or that they would be significantly damaged, because they will not store well. This storage cabbage is called Promise from Johnny Seeds. It is an F1 hybrid, I believe, and I wanted to try this year because this will store for 7 to 8 months in a refrigerated area. And so I really wanted to get us through winter being able to pull from cabbage that I have in my refrigerator. The other cabbages that I've harvested are a late flat Dutch. They looked really sad, and so I did pull those. They are not nearly as big as they should be. Maybe I did not fertilize correctly or something like that, but they should be done at this point. So I went ahead and pulled those. I'll use those mainly for sauerkraut. And then I also had some fiddlehead cabbage that I just don't know where I'm going to store all this stuff. So I went ahead and left those in the ground, but gave them 2 layers of frost fabric. The frost fabric that I use is Agribon 19, and that's from Johnny Seeds as well. But you can get that on Amazon and stuff. That'll give you a 2 to 3 degree protection. And so with 2 of those, I'm imagining we're around 4 to 6 degrees of protection. So hopefully those fiddlehead cabbages will be fine. They're really kind of a novelty. They're kind of fun, but I just don't know what I'm going to do with all this cabbage right now. So I'm going to try to leave that in the ground. And this right here is a more mature kale plant. This is not the same variety as the one in the raised beds over there. I think that might be Ragged Jack. This is a different variety, and I can't quite remember the name of it off the top of my head. But in the mornings, this is pretty laid down and pretty sad looking, but it's been doing just fine. I don't see any leaf burn. They are slightly wilty. They're still throwing up new leaves in the center here, and they're not damaged, and so they look really great. So I'm happy with these, and these guys are going to be fine. I won't need to cover them. And then to finish off, you can see here, this is just a small variety of early golden acre cabbage. I planted it really late. A lot of these guys didn't survive, but the ones that did are very small. They do have some leaf burn on them, and I probably just need to pick these and get them up to the house. They're still perfectly edible. They're just not at their full size, but if I leave them in the ground, they probably won't last. These over here are that purple Savoy that I talked about. And this one will probably be just fine in that freeze. We're actually going to test that and see, because I do have some underneath the frost fabric over there. So we're going to test this guy out and see how he does. And then I'll give you guys an update so that you know what you can grow during this time of year. Now, if you guys live in a colder climate than I do, you can use a thicker frost fabric. But you can also use low tunnels, you can use high tunnels to give an extra protection. You can kind of double up on those. So you could use a low tunnel plus a frost fabric to really extend your season. And there's a great book called The Winter Harvest Handbook, I believe. It's by Elliot Coleman. It's on Amazon. It is a great book if you're living, I mean, even if you're in Maine, that's where he grows, and he grows throughout the winter. So that's a great resource to get on your shelf, that book. He actually has 3 books, and I love all of them. So check those out. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's been a little bit since I've done a gardening video, but I hope this shows you what you can grow throughout the winter, depending on where you are in your zone and your cold temperatures. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video.